Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I'm going to have a go at these two Latourias quickly. This one's coming out of its pot without any new growths or signs of new roots because the media stinks. There are what look like some reasonable roots. That's Dendrobium alexandrae. Okay. Tag to one side. And the other one I'm going to have a go at, this one does have new growths. And this is in a media I've never liked since I got it, and it was on the cards to be repotted. And I do actually see some signs of new roots at the surface. Yeah, they're probably staying out of the media because it's horrible. But I've got a strong new growth there, and I've got one here and two here, other new growths. There may be more to follow, who knows? And that's a cross, that's Polysema crossed with aberrans. So let's get them out their pots and see what we're dealing with here. I may be being overcautious with this one. In my experience, when you water a plant and it smells of mushrooms, you should have repotted it a while ago. And these are new acquisitions, so it's just one of those things I hadn't got round to. Nice new root there. And yeah, I haven't got a lot, but I do have viable roots, and boy is that stuff smelly. Yeah, I've got some new surface roots near the base of the plant. The roots near the centre, as is often the case, are not so good, and quite a few of the viable roots are stuck to their bark. They may have to stay like that. And I'm begrudging watering this, but as a consequence of seeing a lot of that bark stuck to the roots, it's possible that when I rinse this under the tap, some of those older roots will come off. Some of those older bits of bark will come off. But I'm not breaking good roots for the sake of getting a few bits of bark out. I'd rather they just stayed there. I mean, quite honestly, the breaking down process is based on constant moisture. You know, once bark gets older, it holds its moisture longer. So when this gets in its new bark, it's going to dry out pretty damn quick. And as a consequence, the older bark will also dry out. Yeah? So it's going to slow the process down. Okay, the tap is going to do the rest of that. I got delicate new roots near the base of the plant. I don't want to lose them. And there's more than I expected. So pleased with that, but that can now have a good rinse, clean up with the hydrogen peroxide, in case there's anything lurking in there that flipping well shouldn't be. And in the process, I'm hoping most of this moss will come off the base, clean that up a bit too. Right, so that's that one in the sink. And this one's got some real evil stuff in its pot. It might be that the sponge is actually just on the surface, and for some reason somebody thought it was a good idea to keep the surface of the pot moist. Oh, got it. I was going to say there's a lovely new root hanging out the bottom of the pot, but I'm going to have to sacrifice it, but it did actually thread its way back through. Now again, you know, this has just been watered. It would not normally be this dripping wet, but with that sponge in there, it's going to stay wet for a hell of a long time. Now I do have new roots. Good. Not a lot, but some. Some is good. Got a flipping solid lump in the middle of the base of the plant. And this has got perlite in it, as did the last one. But this one's actually got some sort of grit in it as well. I can feel the sharpness and solidness of something other than perlite and bark. But yeah, I do have some nice good root tips in amongst that lot, which I don't want to damage. So again, the tap's going to do most of the work on that one, as with the other one. Yeah, there's some good roots showing. Pleased with that. And not too many dead ones, quite honestly. There are a few in the middle. Yeah, I was just going to say there's one there, and yet it's got a green growing tip. It's not dead. So I need to go careful. There are not too many of these roots coming off, unless they really are soggy. Like that one, just falls off in your hand. But let's get the tap on it and see what we're dealing with, because if I keep poking around, I know I'm going to damage some green tips, and they're precious. So under the tap, and I'll be back when I've cleaned the plants up, sprayed them with hydrogen peroxide and got them ready to pot. I've got dirty hands now, I'm going to get the camera dirty. Okay, what I'm doing with these two, first of all, I'm very pleased with the root system, and I've got some, they're going back in the same pots, quite honestly. They're the right size for the root system I've got, and I know that the plants are going to grow, establish a much better root system, and at some point, not a huge distance in the future, they will need to go in bigger pots. So I don't mind them being in quite confined space at the moment till they get a brand new root system, although their roots are not bad. So that's a mixture of medium bark and small bark. They need to stay moist but not soggy wet. So the medium bark will allow some decent air spaces. The small bark stays wet longer because it's smaller, so it soaks in more. It just does. And I'm adding a fair bit of moss in there as well for the same reason. They need to stay hydrated but not soggy. So having some moss in amongst this lot will aid the hydration around the roots. And for this particular exercise, you know, when I did the Masdevallias a while ago, I didn't break the moss up because they were going in virtually pure moss. So it would have been a bit silly really, wouldn't it? But in this case, I want the moss very evenly distributed amongst the bark pieces. So I just want small areas of hydration, not great big soggy areas that you can get if you leave the moss large. You'll get 2 or 3 pieces all just clumped together as you pot, and you end up with a soggy bit. And then the roots that are in that bit possibly won't do as well as those that are in the parts with some air space. Compacted moss virtually shuts out the air. And in this case, because I know it's having a fair bit of moss in the mix, that's another reason for putting chunky bark in the bottom of an air cone pot. Because if you use a mix that's heavy on the moss and you use an air cone, the air cone virtually becomes useless because the moss will block all the holes and stop the air getting in anyway. So you know, you have to sort of use a bit of the common sense. And I'll tell you a story. You may like this, you may think it's highly amusing. In my case, I found it annoying. I bought these from Orchids and More, along with the giant anosmum with the metre-long canes. That you know, that's the one I actually wanted. But as they had a few Latourias in there that didn't sound bad, I thought, well, we'll add those in, and it reduces the net effect of the postage, which was a relatively high percentage coming from, well, wherever Orchids and More are. But anyway, I bought these back quite a while ago, shall we say. You know, you can remember when I got that huge anosmum, I bought the box in, and it was about 4 foot long. But anyway, that's when I bought them. Now, when you go on a website to buy something, you have to fill in your details, yeah? You know, your name, your address, they need that or they can't send it to you. And the way you're going to pay, you know, which in my case was my card details. And I duly went through the checkout process and got email confirmation that my order had been received and would be dispatched, and I'd be notified, and in due course it was dispatched and I was notified. A couple of days ago I got a bill reminder that I hadn't paid, and would I please forward the payment and let them know when I'd done it. And I thought, well, how the hell does somebody let you have some goods, fund the postage themselves and not take the payment? Quite honestly, how stupid can you get? Anyway, I checked my records and no payment had been taken, despite me leaving the details. and so I duly paid by PayPal this time, not on my card, on the grounds that if there's anything iffy going on, I've got the security of PayPal behind me. But what sort of company dispatches goods and pays for the postage when they haven't had any money? Because I wouldn't. I'm not a trusting soul. Maybe they are just trusting souls, I don't know. But sounds more like a cock up on the admin front at their end, and the payment never got taken when it should have done. Anyway, it's all paid for now. I don't like owing money, so the deed's been done. I haven't had another email yet saying thank you very much for your payment, but you know, my records show that I've paid it to the appropriate place using the PayPal details they gave me. But quite honestly, as businesses go, that sounds like a bit of a silly practice, because what would they have done if I'd just not even replied and not paid? What would they have done? Practically. You know, you could look up and say, oh, they take you to court. Do you know how much that costs? So I could have been nasty and just said on your bike, don't know what you're talking about. Now, okay, we've got you know, the delivery company, they know they delivered it and everything like that, and I'm not that sort of person anyway. But if you're a business and you let people have goods without paying for it, you know, if they're on account and, you know, you've dealt with the people before, fair enough. But I was a nobody, they didn't know me from Adam, so dodgy practice, I thought. Anyway, let's get these two in their pots. I'm hoping not to have to stake these. I'm hoping that there's more than enough roots to hold them in place. Now, there's a fair bit of old bark stuck to these roots, and there are still some older roots tangled in amongst the good ones. But like I've always said, when you know that they're not going to stay in the pot for a huge amount of time, you're better off leaving the good roots you've got safe and sound. And I started seeing a few nice green tips in the sink. Well, they're no good in the sink, they need to be on the plant. That's the time to stop. So yeah, literally I want this media quite well entrenched in amongst these roots. This is the type of plant, because it likes to stay moist, I don't really want loads of air gaps, so I've got to do it a little bit at a time. Start near the top, ease the media down in gently, round the edge preferably, because if you start poking around the middle, that's where your delicate new root tips are. And then you'll have lovely delicate root tips shown in your media that are detached from the rest of the root. In other words, they are of no use anymore. So yeah, down the edge and feed it in gently, very gently. And you can, another beauty of the old clear pots is you can see what you're doing, so you can see if you've left any spaces and do a little bit more work in that area without going mad. Excuse me. So I can see down there's a little bit of a gap, but I'm also hindered. There's a big piece of bark attached to the roots in my way. If I push now, I'll tear that piece of bark off and any roots that are attached to it. So that little airspace is going to have to stay, just for practical reasons. Oh, he's nice and firm in the pot without pushing and shoving too hard. And I don't mind a few roots still showing on the surface. I don't mind that at all. But what I will do is just sort out some very fine compost and moss to just go loosely round the top. I never pack the top of the pot. That always stays loose. That's the first place the delicate new roots are going to be. They'll push down, you know, if they've got to burrow and machete their way into your media because you've packed it in with your fist, you know, they might run along the surface and over the edge of the pot, which is not really where you want them. You don't really want bits of grass on the top of the pot. Not very sightly. Right, now I've forgotten which one's which. That was the Alexandria, I'm pretty sure. The bigger one was the cross. I can always check my video. And I always try and put my tag around the back of the plant, not where it's liable to have its new growths. because sometimes when I water, I only water part of the pot. Now, it might sound strange, but if this was a plant with some new growths and all the new roots pushing out this side, and there weren't many new roots around the back, making the back of the pot wet, it's going to take a long time to dry out with no roots, you know. So I always put my tag around the back, the place I'm possibly not going to water as much as I would around the front. Most people just pour the water in the pot, I'm sure, and forget it, but I do that sometimes. You know, if I'm watering and I think, I'm not sure whether I ought to water this or not, but I don't want to wait round to the next cycle. I have to have watering cycles. I've got nearly 200 plants. Now, okay, probably a third of those are mounted, and they're on a totally different cycle. But basically, you know, things like the Masdevallias and Restrepias are on, at the moment, they're on about a 5-day cycle. Depending on how warm it is, and the others are on a 6, sometimes 7-day cycle if we get a dull spell. And you know, if I think if that one looks like it might not really need watering, but then it ain't going to wait another 6 days, it'll get watered anyway, and at that point I might not want to drown it. I might just want to give it a little bit, a top up. A good way to put it, a top up water, so it's not a drowning. I mean, I don't know whether you've seen videos of me, how I water my pots. I hold them over the bowl and pour water through them until I get bored, and it can take a while. They literally can get as much as 3 litres of water poured through the pot. Not all at once, obviously it goes in stages, but it's a repeated process. I start pouring water and I just keep repeating that over and over again until I know the pot is absolutely soaked. And then I put them to one side and they dry out. Slowly but surely, the roots take up what they need, nutrients if there is any, and hydration if there isn't any nutrients, because I do flush. I don't mean my face goes red. Good job to embarrass me. But you know what I mean, I do flush my pots on a regular basis. I neglected that exercise last year and suffered for it in the winter. I had a build-up of salts, even on my mounts, that I wasn't aware of. Of course, when you start going into your winter period and your pots are nowhere near as wet, you water far less frequently because they're not using the water. And so they weren't getting washed out. You know, they were getting trickles, and the salts were building up like nobody's business. So I had to start this year with pure RO water, and I flushed everything, mounts, and I even tested and measured the amount of undissolved salts that then became dissolved salts, because I flushed the pot, that actually flushed out the bottom of the pot into the water. It was quite high. It worried me. So I vowed that I would never allow that to happen again. So at the moment, because we're well into the growing season now, I feed 3, flush 1. Now I can't say how many days in between because my watering cycle varies, and the mounts, you know, could be being watered every day. So they could get fed 3 consecutive days on the trot followed by a flush. You know, that's just how it is, because they're getting watered a lot more frequently. I don't do anything by the calendar. I let the plants decide. But I do have to have some sort of schedule, or I would just get in a muddle. So I do have routines. Right, new growths not buried. No, still see the base of the new growths. A few roots sticking out. Can I get a bit of moss on that bit? It's just a bare bit that has quite a few roots on it that will probably branch out with a bit of moss. That's about it. A little tiny bit in, oh come on, mess me about. A little tiny bit in there. I can see bare roots, and I can still get a little bit of media in there without burying that new growth. Yay! So there we go. 2 Latourias, and hopefully they'll be happy in their new media, not smelling of mushrooms. Now you can go in there. In this case I'm leaving the original labels, tags, simply because they're a reminder of where I got them from. And although I've had a bit of a hassle with payment, although it's not my hassle really, it was their hassle, I was pleased with the plants I got, because I've heard bad reports from this place from more than one instance. In fact, enough instances that I was a bit iffy about even buying from them, but I wanted that big anosmum, so I was prepared to take the risk. But nonetheless, my purchase was dealt with okay, despite the payment problems, and everything was well packaged. It arrived okay, and I'm pleased with the 3 plants I bought. So apart from their business practices regarding payments, I haven't got any bad words to say about them. That doesn't mean to say I'll buy from them again, but we shall see. So there we go, a couple of Latourias repotted. Now those are the only dendrobiums in the main, I'll say, that would get that sort of media. The reason is they like moisture when they're growing, hence the moss and the smaller bark. You know, a nobile wouldn't get that. A nobile would get chunky bark and no moss. A Dendrobium phalaenopsis would get some moss, because again they like to stay moist. So yeah, 2 Latourias. Do you know, I'm running out of things to repot. This are good. I've just realised I'm nearly out of the medium Orchiata bark, but then I'm nearly out of things to repot this year, so I'm certainly not buying any more at the moment. If I had to, I would get a shed load of chunky bark and pick all the big bits out, leaving the medium bits, if I had to have medium bark on its own. But I've got so little left to repot now that I've got, it's our AGM and auction this Friday. AGM yawn, but they do get it over quickly at my society, real quick. A whole AGM in about half an hour. I can live through that, or sleep through that, whichever. But then we've got the auction, which is great fun, and I will take some pennies in case there's anything that takes my fancy. There may be, there may not be, we shall see, and I'll see how we go. So I may have some new plants at the end of the week, but they really will have to be something pretty special to add to the collection at the moment. The collection is big enough, so I'm only looking for special now. It's really got to catch my eye. What I'd love to get is a few more really nice, strong, healthy, large Cattleyas. Chances of those turning up at our auction are pretty damn slim, but there is one guy who's downsizing his collection because he's moving house. Now it depends how much he's downsizing, because he has a wide variety of plants, and I know he grows Cattleyas and Dendrobiums, in amongst other things. So we'll see. And apart from that, the next event is the Malvern show, which is middle of June, about the 16th, 17th, something like that, which isn't that far away now. And that's a big event. That's, for me and my daughter, that's a 2-day event. We're going up on the Saturday at a leisurely pace, spend the afternoon show. We're staying in a hotel, and then we're off out for the evening with the lads and the girls, the crew, and frivolity and probably some wine, not necessarily in that order, will take place. And then we've got a nice leisurely day at the show again on Sunday, and a leisurely drive home at our own pace. We normally do it in one day, you know, and it's a 2.5 to 3 hour drive, which means a silly early start, and getting back quite late in the evening, totally cream crackered. So nice leisurely 2-day event. I'm sure I will find some orchids to buy there. And it's the last big show of the year, so it'll be my last big chance of the year. Okay, thanks for dropping by. See you next time, listening to all my waffle.